Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's Tuesday, the 10th of February, and it's 11:15 p.m. A little bit of a late start tonight, but not really. I'm all over the place with what time I do the podcast. Um, so there's a lot of things to talk about tonight. I don't want to get to the point where I'm repeating myself too much. But at the same time, the complexity of all the variables involved are such that every once in a while I like to do a show where I just sort of tie things together and revisit some things I've talked about in some specificity in the past and connect them to some other things and re-examine them in light of you know, recent disclosures, I guess, is the best way to say it. And the recent disclosures I'm talking about here are mainly the Epstein files. And you saw this afternoon, I put up a post that was Jordan Crowder's video, who appears to be a student, um, follower. I don't know what the right word is here, but highly influenced by Robert C. Monroe. Talks about Monroe a lot. I guess you could call him a consciousness journeyer. Very upbeat fellow, very positive. And I think that's important too. I think to stay on the positive side of things is very important. Um, I think it keeps you in the right bandwidth to receive a better life and a better moment by moment existence. There's no sense in like weighing yourself down with all these things like you're carrying a cross. This simulacrum, hologram, matrix, simulator, whatever you want to call it, it is created by something ultimately that loves us. The simulation is multidimensional until you get to the true reality. Um, the psychics don't understand it any better in terms of what it really is. The remote viewers don't understand it any better. The intelligence agencies don't understand it any better. It seems like they do at times because they have all this information. But information is just information. It's just data. In this sense, it's cosmic data. Oh boy, there's life all through the universe. Yeah, who gives a shit? How does that change the price of tomatoes or potatoes? How does that change anything in your life? It doesn't at all. And we're here to understand our lives and ourselves. That's the only reason nature or the creator, but let's just stay with nature for now. That's the only reason I can think of why nature would give such a high degree of awareness to the human animal on this planet. Our level of awareness is completely um, out of sync with everything else in nature. I mean, the leap forward from the mammalian world to the human world is gigantic, huge, because with the human life comes this complex inner life. And the animals, they don't really have that, you know? So we have this complex inner life, and we can get depressed, we can get suicidal, we can get off track, we can get extremely violent. A very funny animal, the human animal. And it all comes down to how we manage the baseline consciousness that we have, because the moment you get the baseline human consciousness, it doesn't really matter what degree of perception you have, what degree of consciousness you have. 1%, 2%, 180%. Let's say it's 360. Let's go with the circle metaphor for consciousness. Doesn't matter how much you have. As soon as you're in the human game, you have all the Roy Batty problems. And Roy Batty was the Nexus 6 android in the classic 1982 Ridley Scott film Blade Runner with Harrison Ford and Rutger Hauer. And then all of these problems come into play, right? All of these things come into play. For example,
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
so those of you who know, right? That's widely considered one of the best scenes in cinema history. You know, people talk about movies and stuff, but there's also this whole class of categorization just based on scenes. And that is one of the best scenes in cinema history since the beginning of movie making. And you can just look it up on YouTube. It's just look for Tears in the Rain. And for those of you, God forbid, who've never seen Blade Runner or who have never read Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, I'll give you a quick rundown of what's going on there. So the blonde character is a Dutch actor named Rutger Hauer. He plays an android named Roy Batty. And this is a highly, highly evolved android. So evolved that if they're not told they're androids, they themselves think they're human. They have synthetic memories and everything. And the movie is about this group of Nexus 6s coming near the end of life cycle. They get, I think, 4 or 6 years to live. And it's built right into their cells. And so Roy and this group of rebellious Nexus 6 androids who were working off planet come back to Earth to meet their maker, the head of the Tyrell Corporation, a geneticist. And in the course of doing that, they are hunted down by the Harrison Ford character, who's a special kind of cop called a Blade Runner, whose job is to hunt down rogue androids. And there's these cognitive tests that they have to give them while watching the eyes dilate to determine whether they're an android or not, because they fit in so well. And the whole point of the movie is the leader of this group, Roy Batty, is the last one. Harrison Ford kills them all. And at the end, Roy Batty has the opportunity to exercise vengeance and kill the man who killed all of the beings, the other androids, that he loved. But in his final moments, because his biological clock is fading, he chooses to save them and demonstrate that life is supreme, and demonstrate that this android consciousness came to appreciate life so much that he could no longer take it away from any other being, including his worst enemy and the enemy of his kind. It's very moving if you watch the whole film, and I suggest you do. I'm not a sci-fi guy. I think I've said that on the Talamanca review. Don't like sci-fi. I like classical literature set in realistic contexts. But that is an exception to my rule. I mean, that movie and that book just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. So much foresight in it, too. It saw so many things about the future that have turned out to be accurate. It's really kind of staggering how they got all that right, you know? So I was thinking today about the way we live in the West. Um, the way we live in general all over the world now. How absolutely shitty life has become. And it is shitty. And I'm not trying to do a cynical podcast, but hear me out. Life is shitty now. Nobody just lives their lives. So here we are, the most intelligent, aware creature on the planet, just at the baseline ego awareness. I'm Bruce McDonald. I'm James Smith. I'm Roy, whatever. Just at that baseline level of consciousness that every human being has. Although it seems sometimes that some people can slip out of it and descend into a consciousness that's completely preternatural. Drugs and such can do it, but for the most of us, it's the burden of carrying that. Because with the added power of being human, you stand above nature, but there's a whole bunch of responsibilities that come in. And nobody talks about these anymore. Okay? I mean, we have tribal codes, religious codes, stuff like this to try to tell people how to live, scaring them with heaven and hell, all this kind of nonsense. And I understand why they did those things. But a new definition of the whole paradigm has to come into play. Okay? It has to come into play. Otherwise, we're doomed. We can't go on in this secular humanist Western model, which has become so sacrilegious toward life itself. We can't really go back to tribal hunter gatherer. There's too many people on the planet for everybody to hunt and gather. Although that would have been a very beautiful phase to go through human life, I think, anyways. That sort of dances with wolves life, right? Some of you might find it too harsh, but I think it's just kind of beautiful. I've been profoundly interested by my friends and neighbors, the Kevakar, and how they live and what they do and all these sorts of things. And the question comes, in our minds, in our collective consciousness, in our cultures, the question is, what's the purpose of life? And I don't think there's even a whole lot of people that ask that question anymore. Probably more now. You know, if you if the end of the material rainbow is Jeffrey Epstein, what's the point? What's the point of becoming a millionaire? What's the point? What should it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? And when you're destroying children, there's something really wrong with you. That should be something we can all agree on. All of us, you know? But it seems we don't agree on that anymore. And that to me is a little bit disheartening, but, you know, we go through dark times. Human consciousness cycles through very, very dark times. So if we have this high caliber consciousness, different from dogs, cats, everything in nature, what's its purpose? How do you live your life? What's the purpose of creativity? We're the only animal on the planet that can demonstrate creativity. There's no other animal. What's the point of it? What if you take God out of the equation, and I'm okay with that, and you just look at it from a Darwinian perspective or from a humanist perspective or a naturalist perspective, an anthropological perspective, an evolutionary perspective, if you want, although I don't really believe in it, but nonetheless, they're valid perspectives for framing discourse and discussion. Why would nature itself create something potent enough to destroy it? Why would our mother, the earth, create something that could murder it or severely harm it? Why would nature create something that could disobey it and act in a preternatural way outside of the natural and the supernatural? And the supernatural is just a higher level of natural understanding. There's nothing really, it just is what it is. When you've been looking at this stuff as long as I have, it just, there's nothing really arresting about it. You know, Christ walked on the water. Okay. You know, I was watching this YouTube video yesterday about a famous Indian yogi um, who used to meditate on concrete steps beside a river. I think it was in the city of Kalish, which is where a lot of Hindus go to die. And he used to meditate in the nude. And the British decided that this was um, public indecency. And this fellow could be seen meditating on top of the water. He would also be seen to slowly sink into the water, sitting cross-legged in the middle of the river. Slowly sink into the river and disappear for hours and then come back up. I know it sounds crazy, but if you believe a man walked on water and changed water to wine, why wouldn't you believe this? Why is it so when the Indian yogis do it, it's demonology, but when Christ does it, it's God? Doesn't make any sense if you're being rational about these things. And to a certain extent, you have to be rational even in spiritual matters. So the Indians tried to arrest him and they couldn't. He would just disappear. They would come to get him and he would literally disappear in front of them. And then when they would go back to the police station, he'd reappear. They'd come back out, he'd disappear again. Finally, he took pity on them, allowed them to arrest him. They took him to the jail cell. And then the desk sergeant notices that there's a crowd of people gathered in front of the police station. And so the British constables go out and everybody's looking up. So the constables look up and there's this yogi on top of the roof of the jail meditating. And they had just locked him in a cell an hour before. So finally they realized they couldn't control him and they just let him go. And he went back to the river and meditated every day nude. No, I'm not saying that dude figured out what life's about, but I'm certainly saying that that dude forces us to ask some more questions. So the question of what is life and what is its purpose and how are we supposed to live it, it never really ends until you get to the end of the spiritual journey. But my life has changed so much over here. I love my life. I love that I don't have to work like a beast of burden in an office. I love that I don't have to decompress after stressing myself out working in an office. I love that I can make a nice living and I can just go about my life and continue to ask human questions and behave in a human way. I like that I live with no master. I don't have a boss. I don't have a supervisor. I have people I work with. I have deadlines, and that's it. And so it gives me a lot of time to do things other people can't do. Like read The Brothers Karamazov, like read Crime and Punishment, like read Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and really read it. Not just skim through it to say that you read it and you can pop off a few lines at a cocktail party. But really, take 2 weeks, read it slowly, reread the passages that move you, stop when you're reading, think about it, contemplate it, continue reading, enjoy your life. It seems to me we hit a critical point some time ago, probably 75 years ago, where the yoke of living was lifted from our shoulders. We no longer had to live like mules in a field, cultivating turnips, coffee, corn, what have you. And then the burden upon society became, how do we keep people interested in participating in society? What stops people with the level of technology from splintering off into micro societies where everybody's needs can be met? There aren't too many health concerns because there's very little stress in the community. Everybody eats exceptionally well because they're producing most of their own food. And then you have some form of culture to create amongst the people living together. The Amish do it with religion. The natives do it with long-standing roots and culture and connection to land. Why is it so hard for us, the first worlders, to learn how to live again? Why is our only dignity making money if the end of that journey is finding yourself on an island raping children? I mean, what sense does that really make when you think about it? It doesn't make any sense at all. The greatest gift you can be given in this life is the freedom to live and live well with all of your basic needs met. There's no greater dignity in life. I consider myself to be wealthier than any Hollywood star, wealthier than any tech mogul, wealthier than any world leader. I mean, they have to work 16, 18-hour days, risk their health, put their soul on the line in a sense. And all we really have to do is live, and nobody can really get it right anymore. It's just strange to me that it's come to this. It's just strange to me from the position I look at life now, being here in Costa Rica since 2012 and on this mountain living since 2017. It seems very strange to me. I've lost all my understanding of why I even did it. Well, no choice is the answer. There's no rational reason for why you get up and you do what you do every day. The only reason we have is, well, I have no choice. I have to pay my bills. I bought this condo for 700,000. I have a heavy mortgage. I have to pay for it. And that just doesn't cut it anymore after you've been out of the system a while, right? And then I was thinking more today about, well, what's so great about how you're living, Bruce? I sometimes sort of turn on myself and become very self-critical. I think this is a very constructive process, by the way. I don't think there's anything negative about it at all. I think every once in a while you should take a very cynical look at yourself. I think it's cleansing. So I said to myself, well, what have you figured out, Bruce? What's so great about your life? And the answer surprised me a little bit. And it brought about a realization. So as I continue as a journeyman on my way to full realization of self, hopefully, full realization of the Creator through experience, it occurred to me that one of the things that has been extremely meaningful in my life that I think is worth sharing is by experience, direct experience. I've had a lot of happenings, a lot of events in my life, a lot of supernatural stuff, a lot of paranormal stuff that has allowed me to answer some very difficult questions about what God isn't. You know, most people are beginning from a completely flat line, right? That flat line is what I call sense mind consciousness and nothing more. And you can see it. You can see when somebody goes from the flat line to a true belief or a true understanding through experience to something beyond the flat line. And you see a lot of it in the Christian testimony. No, I was an alcoholic and the Lord saved me. Stuff like this. And I think that's beautiful. I'm not saying anything negative about it. Very powerful, you know? But what are they really saying? They're saying that was what was making them depressed and what was making them an alcoholic was the belief that there was no meaning to life other than the time you were given. Imagine that. So they're incidentally affirming my thesis that a life without meaning can't be lived. Now you take an honest look around you and ask yourself, how many people are living with any meaning? especially in the first world, especially as the stress levels increase. There's no merit in it anymore. At least in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it might have been worth it to work the 50, 60-hour weeks. You could have a cottage, you could have a sailboat, maybe a speedboat. You could go on nice vacations. North Americans made more than everybody else. Maybe for the baby boomers, it made sense. But for anyone after that, no. Doesn't really make sense for Gen X, doesn't make sense for the millennials, and it certainly doesn't make sense for Gen Z. Because you're putting in that same sacrifice that the baby boomers did, but the material payoff is not there anymore. You don't get the $2 million home in the mountains. You don't get the financial security. You have to get the same level of education at exorbitant prices, by the way. So you can get maybe the same education in terms of practical ability. You could get it in India for maybe 1/10 the cost of what an American university would cost you. Not even an Ivy League university. You know, the students from China who come over to the American university system, even Harvard and stuff like that, even the Ivy League, they're the average Chinese students. They go to the American university not because it's a higher pedigree anymore in the global labor force or in the Chinese labor force. They go to America because their families have money and they couldn't compete in the Chinese university system. They couldn't get into the good universities in China. So they come over to America. And not a lot of people really know that. So again, we return to the question of how do you live? Why do you live? What's the meaning of life? And for me, the answer is seeking. And then when you find something meaningful, practice. Practice, 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 practice. So for me, the practice of meditation as an internal study and an internal movement system into other dimensions and into higher levels of intuition and spontaneous knowledge. Creativity, writing books. Even the books I'm doing now require a tremendous amount of creativity. It's not just the system that's producing them. Oh, by the way, whoever made the Terence McKenna suggestion, that was a good one. I'm actually on that now. I've got, I don't know, quite a few of his transcripts produced. I downloaded a lot of his material and transcribed it, and I'm ready to get going on that. It took me the whole day to get the transcriptions done and everything. We'll see what he has to say. This book process really filters people out. Some people sound really smart when you hear them talk, like in a 2-hour lecture, but when you really sit down to study them and write a book, there's nothing there. As I said, I mean, that was the case I found with Mr. Egan in Australia or Mexico, wherever he's at now. Nice enough guy, and he's helped a lot of people. Um, no doubt about it. So I shouldn't be too hard on him, although I was the other night. Um, I've changed my mind again about the Mark Passio book. I was rereading it again today, and I went, "Yeah, this isn't too bad. I'm going to put this up." So it's an excellent introduction to his work in the third person. And I chose the third person because it's an observational book that doesn't quote his material but comments upon it, which is legally safe. So now I'm going to do Terence McKenna. And it occurred to me as I was thinking about these things today that I'm actually really happy. And happiness You see, even the concept of happiness has been corrupted in the West now, and it's mainly been corrupted by madmen, by Madison Avenue, by advertising, showing you all these beautiful people getting the things they want in life, a Lexus, a this, a that, a Mercedes. Oh, that's happiness. No, those people aren't happy. The people making the ads aren't happy. None of those people are really happy. Happiness is just when you realize that you're living your life correctly. You may not get everything figured out, but you're trying, you're sincere. And the creator just creates this space for you, this wake, if you will, the back end of a motorboat, for you to just go through life and you can enjoy life. And what I'm realizing now is just very few people ever realize this. So getting back to what I was saying earlier, what's so great about what I've done? And I realized I've answered a lot of questions. I may not be able to tell you what God is, but I can tell you than anybody, almost better than anybody, what God is not. Okay? God is not an individuated being among many. Therefore, the God of the Bible is an invalid God, because that is an individuated being in one among many. This is the story of the Elohim, right? Cliff goes into this, but it's all right. It's all true. This is the whole point of what Jordan Maxwell was saying. We have to choose the Israelites or whoever. We have to choose one God. But that means there were many to choose from. So the moment you're dealing with one among many, you're not dealing with God. Or let's better put, you're not dealing with the creator. And you only want to direct your energy, your search toward the creator. And the only synonym I can come up with that approximates what I mean when I say the creator is life itself. Just being in life is being in the creator. Extraterrestrials are not God. Okay? They may have tinkered with us, our genetics, and that would cosmically what they did was illegal, unlawful. And they know it too. They know it. So they're not God. Anything that punishes you or judges you is not God. So what does that leave? The pantheons are not God. Zeus and that pantheon are not God. My cosmic heritage, the Tuatha De Danann, the Celtic gods that precede the Druids, that's not God. That's just another race of beings. The Nordics are not God. Zeus and the Greek pantheon are not God because there's one among many. Odin and the Norse pantheon are not God, one among many, and hierarchical. And yet at the same time, all of the forces I just listed are operative in the world upon human consciousness. And most people live in a state of deception, thinking they're communicating with their creator, and they're not. It doesn't mean that these entities are necessarily going to hurt you. In many instances, they can be beneficial. The Nordics, through human channels, are known to do a lot of healings, you know? So figuring out what something isn't is a big process in figuring out what it is, especially when you're trying to define something that has no tangible qualities, cannot be anthropomorphized, cannot be attributed a personality. If you're dealing with a God that demonstrates wrath, you're not dealing with God. Tell you that right, because there's no wrath in the Creator. The Creator simply provides the energetic containers, mental, memory, emotional, and physical, the dimensions by which we can have this human experience. Everything that we perceive to be acting against us is in some way, shape, or form a consequence of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions while we're alive. So as we breathe into, through our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, as we imprint this living membrane we exist within, physical, sensual, mnemonic, and mental, it imprints, forms templates, and then discharges them back into our timeline because we told the Creator through our thoughts, through our feelings, that we wanted to experience these things. The truth is, most people are absolutely experts at manifesting. There's no need to read any books on how to manifest. You're doing it all the time. You just don't realize you're doing it. And the reason you don't realize you're doing it is you've never mastered the art of stillness so that you can be still enough to see these things. And then when you see them, you go, oh my God, why am I thinking these things? Why am I feeling these things? Who put it in my head that I had to have this house? Who put it in my head that I have to have this car? Well, Madison Avenue did that. The Madman, Don Draper and his crew. Edward Bernays, for those of you who've read the Blackbird Talmud book, you know, Bernays was so good at manipulating the collective mind that the State Department hired him to stage coups. He did the Honduras coup in the 50s. A fucking ad guy from Madison Avenue, Sigmund Freud's grandson. And if you if you were to do 100-year or 125-year connect the dots bloodline thing the way David Icke did in The Greatest Secret, all of these people would connect to Jeffrey Epstein in 2026 by no more than 2 degrees of separation. Okay? It's the same consciousness force that's been moving through the world for 125 years to bring us to this point. Seems Jewish, but it isn't, because there's a lot of non-Jews working in it too. So based on what I've told you tonight about what the Creator is not, what can we assume? Well, it's literally impossible for God to have a chosen people. The Creator is managing literally, I don't know what comes after trillion, gazillion? I don't know what comes after gazillion. An almost uncountable number of sentient life forms. Not to mention all of the semi-sentient life that goes into the natural ecosystems to support the sentient life. The Creator is supporting all of that through the waves of life that it emanates from itself. Do you really think in all of that it would select a chosen people? It's fucking ludicrous. That's some Madison Avenue shit right there. That they've convinced people outside of their own tribe that this could be true. Christian Zionists, for example. Christian Zionists. It's ridiculous. Now, one of the things about being a Canadian or being an American is that if you were born in the 60s or the 50s and you're late 50s or late 60s now, you were probably raised in a multicultural environment. Radically multicultural environment. So for example, in the city I lived most of my life, Toronto, there are more languages spoken in that one city than any other city in the world. And it strikes me, or it struck me today as I was contemplating these things. that with all of this thinking and materialization we've been doing for 125 years, let's say since Henry Ford's factory production line, it's been nonstop production in the industrial age. And, they're talking about the age we're going into now is, as Klaus Schwab constantly reminds us, it's post industrial. So we went agricultural, industrial, and now we're going into some kind of post industrial. But the way they're shaping it up now, it will have nothing to do with God. In fact, I'm becoming more and more convinced they are trying to take the concept and the idea and even the genetics, the genetic disposition to seek, out of human beings, which will not be allowed. The Creator will not allow that to happen because everything has to grow. It's like trying to block water. It's like the Three Gorges Dam. Most engineers think at some point, it will break. And these things will break too. They can't be sustained. There's no way they can be sustained. Those orbs following Chris Bledsoe around, they have nothing to do with God. UFO of God is the name of his book. Nice guy. I actually like him quite a bit. John Edmonds was friends with him. But it's nonsense that it has anything to do with God. It has everything to do with other life forms. Those orbs are life forms, no doubt about it. They've always been here. I've known people 10, 15 years ago who could manifest orbs, just like Bledsoe. I don't know why they're making such a big deal out of this guy. That's not God, you know? And so, absent God or the pursuit of the meaning of life, because God's just a word, as Deepak Chopra says, God's just a construct. Cute girls are real. But there is a God in a sense, that meaning that there's an end to the journey, of consciousness, and I call it God. And it's different than what Sadhguru is talking about. He's talking about mastering these human systems, mental, mnemonic, emotional, and physical. And that's a noble way to live as well, but that's not the end of the journey. It's benign Luciferianism. Had portals open up in my house. I had a white light floating in my house. Had men in black at this house. I've had the duende at this house. Those are all part of the life experience, not God. And so the search continues. But I'll tell you something. It doesn't matter if you finish the journey in any one lifetime, but if you sincerely go at it, you're going to finish. And the joy in living is putting part of your life into this. And if you can't see this now after this Epstein dump, I'm starting to think this Epstein dump was a blessing. Just the way I said, if a demon comes into your life and you're living at the baseline and you get knocked out of the baseline into a deeper contemplation of life because you're forced to through a highly negative supernatural experience, whether you realize it or not, you've been blessed. Why is that so poorly marketed and handled by the Catholics? Because that's how they make their money, man. And everything's about money now. And that's another thing that happens when you choose a different way of life, that you move somewhere that doesn't have property tax. You don't have to pay a mortgage. You don't have to pay rent. And you can have 17 pigs and 50 chickens and 20 egg-laying hens and thousands of tilapia fish in 3 ponds, which eat the pig shit, by the way. You have time to think because the basic stuff about life you figured out. And that's the genius of what my son and I did up here. It's really kind of remarkable now that I think about it. Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful. And if you seek sincerely, and practice as well, you'll be guided on your journey towards this end result of trying to find God. You'll be guided, and knowing that you're guided is a tremendous joy. It's the opposite of a demonic possession. You're guided by something benign that loves you, and you know it. You don't believe it, you know it because you see signs. And it's not an individuated entity, angelic or extraterrestrial or any of that. It's just life itself will speak back to you. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. How about that? It only took me 48 hours or 72 hours to digest the Epstein dumps, and now I'm good again. Anyways, I'm Bruce McDonald. I'm going to call this podcast Gratitude, and this has been the Talamanca Review.